Fiona, we should touch on James Ryan, the captain, as well. Be interesting to observe. He was asked about his approach and he said, you'd have to ask the other guys. I suppose I tried to lead by example, which is a boring answer, but hopefully leading by actions this weekend is the plan. It's funny, I think we can actually make this mistake with taller people and just assume they're natural leaders. I could say like this evolutionary thing. Certainly after the 19 World Cup, I do remember Joe Schmidt being asked, well, who should be captain now as Rory best departs the scene? And Ryan was in the form of his life, give or take, several months. And, you know, Schmidt, while being very respectful, was sort of saying, oh, I'm not sure he's necessarily ready. And just one or two other comments here or there have led me to maybe mistakenly put two and two together and just think he mightn't be a natural born leader. And yet they do keep going back to him, so they obviously identify something in him. He's 26 years of age now. I think this maybe is his fifth time captaining. Seventh, excuse me.
Yeah.
So I was writing a piece on him, so it's fresh in my mind.
Okay, that was impressive knowledge. What have you observed in Ryan, the captain, thus far, Fiona?
Yeah, look, I think I'm delighted for him. I think after he was captain, you know, the last couple of times before Ireland started to perform well, I thought he was put under a lot of pressure. He looked like his game probably, that maybe the captaincy was getting to him in how he was playing. He wasn't playing the best rugby of his life, but look, he looks like a different character now. I'd agree with his mentality around captain is people have different things. You know, you've natural leaders. So when I would have played, Fiona Coughlin would have been a natural leader, whereas Ciara Griffin, when she was captain in Ireland, you watch how she plays and you go out there and you want to play for her. She's not all talk. And I would imagine he's a little bit around that area. James Ryan is like that as well. He puts the performances in at training. He's very physical and he says very few words, but what he says means something. And I think he has obviously earned the right to be captain. He's in Farrell's head the whole time. We can see if Johnny's not available, he's the guy in the pack. He's putting his hand up. And you've guys like Peter O'Mahony who've been around a long time and captained their province. So for James Ryan to come into his mind, I would imagine he's doing the correct type of talking at training, and he's someone, you know, a lot of people haven't talked about him, but I think in this Six Nations, he's one of my top players in watching how he's playing. I think he's performing really well. He's back to when you saw him break onto the scene. You almost feel like he could be 30 years of age when you hear he's 26. I feel like he's almost been around forever, but he's playing some of the best rugby, and Farrell is into that psychology of players, and I firmly believe in making him captain. He'll get the best out of him, and he will perform on Saturday as well. He'll be able to cope with that pressure.
First point, Rud, he's playing well, as Fiona says. That's a prerequisite. It was interesting when Brian O'Driscoll and Craig Doyle and Dr. Irwin were in the camp that Ryan reportedly stood up and spoke brilliantly, and you know, maybe at 26 feeling more confident in that realm. So those 2 points point to him being more able to step into that role. The other aspect of captaincy, and I think he was criticised in Paris last year, there's the decision making on the field aspect, kick for points or kick to touch, and he was criticised that night. Yeah. So they're the various fronts you have to master. He's 26 now.
Yeah, and I think we can forget that he had a number of concussions, and he spoke before the South Africa game last year about how his form dipped in 2020, 2021 because he was worried about his health. You know, he was worried going into contact. He was worried about his own performances. And then you throw in the fact that in 2018 he was bulletproof, and he won every game, and he was on this miraculous run, and he's since spoken about how he just thought this was going to last forever, and then suddenly 2019 happened, and that's a gut punch for a player who's sailing along, and then suddenly the team falls apart and his form drops, and then he gets a couple of injuries. So he's been asked to lead the team and captain the team, but he knows he's not playing as well as he could be, and he's also dealing with the disappointment of his world basically crumbling, you know, going from a Grand Slam winner to a World Cup humiliation. So I think all of that knocked him, and he wasn't the player he had previously been. Whereas in New Zealand, in the second test, having been outplayed by Sam Whitelock in the first game, he found his form again and he started dominating. And in the third test, when Whitelock returned after his injury absence, he was the better player on the day, and I think that was huge for him. And this year he looks like the player he was in 18, although a more mature version. He's going after the opposition line out at the right times. He's making huge impact, and the numbers say he's getting up to the level that he was at. He looks slightly bigger, he looks stronger, he looks at the pinnacle of his powers. And that allows you to think about leading a bit more, I think. And having captained the team 6 times in the past, in different experiences. Defeats in Paris, defeats in Twickenham. His first experience was away in Twickenham. A couple of lesser games. He's learned through all of those, and now there's no guarantee he's going to get it all right on Saturday either, or that he is the long-term successor, because Leinster think Gary Ringrose is the next captain, and that is an interesting decision that may have ramifications for Ireland as well. But he's certainly a better player now than he was a year ago, and he's fulfilling the promise that we all had in him. Now, he was never that bad, and he's 51 caps at 26 years of age. Like he's on the way to being a Test centurion and an all-time great. But he fell below the standards that he set previously. I was at his press conference today. He's still in that environment, still quite a closed shop. He doesn't really, even the quotes that you've read there, like, you know, Sexton is great value for us. We turn up and we get goals. Whereas Ryan is you're still pulling teeth a little bit with him, and he's still, you know, one-on-one or in a small group, he's very good, and he is well able to hold his own on talk of politics and history, and the fact that his family connection goes back to the Easter Rising and things like that. But when you ask him about team stuff, he's still a little bit of a way to go in terms of that Ireland captain kind of presence.
Do you think that's important?
I think if you're going to be a good captain, I think that's part of it, but I don't think it's something that's necessary at this point where he's standing in, and I think he will grow more comfortable because there's clearly a very charismatic, intelligent guy behind it who is not yet ready to. And Alan Wynne Jones will be someone over the years who has gotten more interested or more effusive and more comfortable in that realm, because it's not easy sitting in a clammy dressing room with, you know, a room full of people you don't know, trying to, you know, like, that's not an easy scenario. But it is something that Sexton now just walks in and he just holds court, you know, because he's 37 and it's such
different. Like 26 is middle of your career rugby. It's a very young person in real life to sit in there in front of all these journalists,
largely older men, you know, who've been writing stuff about you for 6 years, not all of it complimentary, you know, so that is hard to park, you know, and that's just something that a captain, that's part of what he has to learn. He also has to do post-match functions, you know, pre-match team talks, things you got to layer into it. But I was interested in what Brian O'Driscoll said last week. I think the fact that he's able to do that suggests that behind the scenes he's really popular. He picks the music in the dressing room. He's known as the Big Cheese. Like, there's a personality there that we haven't really seen in the and like Peter O'Mahony's chosen never really to show that inner personality in some ways in the media, and that's fine. That's his choice. No, some of them don't, but like it's just part of the captaincy package that you know you can choose not to bring, but it can help, I think, set the tone externally when you're more comfortable with it.
Well, there's no doubt Sexton is using the media now in a very clever way, often I think just to send messages to the group.
Absolutely,
and it's very effective, I'm sure, and they take note when he says X or Y.
Yeah, but he's almost like an extra assistant coach.
Sorry, just on that point as well, Joe, when you're talking with Ireland as well, I've noticed when it comes to those key big decisions, you'll see the likes of Peter O'Mahony, you know, even Johnny, he's discussing it with the other players. Maybe Farrell has those 2 or 3 leaderships. So I think that takes that pressure off Ryan when it comes to game day, whether he goes for a scrum, whether he kicks to the corner, whether it's 3 points. So it's technically, you can't blame one person. Everyone's going to have an opinion, and he'll obviously make the final decision on that.
That's been a really interesting evolution, I think, in the last, maybe it was happening before, but Sexton goes to Ryan and says, what do you want to do? And he goes, I feel good about them all, let's go to the corner. In the end game of the Australia game, it was Ross Byrne who said we're kicking that penalty. I think it was Ryan was the on-field captain at the time. I think Peter O'Mahony started that game as captain, and Ryan, I think, had finished the game as captain, and Ryan looked at Byrne, 2 St Michael's lads, 2 Leinster lads. Byrne went, obviously I'm kicking this, and, you know, gave him the ball. So there is I think he spoke today about how himself, Henderson and Byrne will be the kind of the trio of the key decision makers on the pitch. It's possibly breaking an embargo there, but that's okay.
It's fine.
Nobody's
listening. The psychology of all that's so interesting. That was just a taster of this evening's Wednesday Night Rugby. You can get the full podcast, the full conversation with Rory and Fiona, wherever you get your podcasts, or equally you can download the OTB Sports app.